Fitfi value figure January 2030 and January 2030. The expense of STEP application really is gauged to especially be at around a base truly worth of 371. Which for the most part is genuinely critical. The STEP application esteem kind of worth can explicitly show up at a restriction of 422, with the regular trading essentially worth of 410 and USD in a huge way. STEP application Fitfi value figure February 2030 for February. The expense of STEP application is expected to really show up at a normal month to month. Fundamentally the farthest basically reaches of 427. While the coin will trade between a restriction of 439 and no less than 407 STEP application value figure walk 2030. The genuinely ordinary expense of STEP application Fitfi could for the most part go to 440 towards spring's end. In an unobtrusive manner Fitfi could sort of trade around a generally sort of outrageous by and large worth of 456, with the base expected cost of 424. In a significant manner Fitfi value gauge April 2030 and April 2030. The expense of STEP application is gauged to especially be at around a base truly worth of 433. Which truly is very huge. The STEP application esteem commonly worth can generally show up at a constraint of 473. With a normal trading kind of worth of 453 and USD. In a kind of significant way Fitfi value figure May 2030 and May 2030. The expense of STEP application not entirely set in stone, to generally be at around a base worth of 447. Which basically is genuinely huge. The STEP application esteem commonly worth can show up at a constraint of 496. With the ordinary trading essentially worth of 466 in USD Fitfi value figure. June 2030 and June 2030. The expense of STEP application basically is gauged to explicitly be at around a base kind of worth of 456. The STEP application and incentive in every practical sense worth can show up at a restriction of 519. With the commonplace trading especially worth of 476 and USD incredibly STEP application Fitfi value expectation July 2030. With respect to July 2030 STEP application cost, generally is checked to show up at a most negligible possible level of 470. The Fitfi cost could show up at a most outrageous possible level of 543, with the common gauge cost of 490. Incredibly STEP application Fitfi value expectation August 2030. With respect to August 2030 STEP application cost, is guessed to really show up at a most decreased possible level of 490. In an unpretentious manner the Fitfi cost could for the most part show up at a most by and large outrageous possible level of 567. With the common guess cost of 510. In a quite enormous manner, STEP application Fitfi value expectation September 2030. With respect to September 2030 STEP application cost, generally is measured to by and large show up at a most diminished possible level of 500 or so. They thought the Fitfi cost could explicitly show up at a most essentially outrageous possible level of 593. With the run-of-the-mill gauge cost of 520 Fitfi value conjecture, October 2030 and October 2030. The expense of STEP application is gauged to be at around a base worth of 515, which is genuinely critical. The STEP application esteem kind of worth can generally show up at a restriction of 619, with the run-of-the-mill trading worth of 530 in USD STEP application value forecast. November 2030 The expense of STEP application really is expected to arrive at especially worth of 527 in 2030. In a kind of large manner the Fitfi cost could show up at a generally in every practical sense outrageous especially worth of 640, with the ordinary trading cost of 546 all through 2030. Which is genuinely critical STEP application Fitfi value conjecture. December 2030 for December, the expense of STEP application by and large is expected to essentially show up at a common month to month sort of the uttermost generally reaches of 562. While the coin will trade between a restriction of 662 and something like 543 STEP application, especially past value examination, with a development in its trading volume and market cap, The step app's expense, sort of, has shown a respectable addition of 25.29 at this point from latest 7 days. The Fitfi explicitly was in especially extraordinary pretty vertical example, and extended by 29.26 step application especially has shown solid areas for outstandingly of late, and this could be good, an especially open way to make a plunge and contribute, or so they for the most part thought. Step application value gauge 2030 facts. What will generally be step application worth in 2030 or so they in a real sense thought. The Fitfi cost certainly is gauged to especially show up at a most really outrageous level of 662. With most certainly the smallest expense of 543, close to the completion of 2030 steps application, have a future which truly is genuinely huge, to the extent that worth step application has a phenomenal potential to generally show up at new levels. It is gauged that Fitfi will augment in regard in an unobtrusive way according to express subject matter experts and business analysts. Step application can in every practical sense cause an uproar in and out of town. Cost of 945 till 2030 in a huge manner. Is step application kind of worth buying in 2030? Step apps worth should continue to reach out as lack will in extremely broad empower cost ascend amazingly sympathetically. Note there really is a bet to any theory. Essentially especially put assets into what you can fundamentally accomplish preceding arriving at any goals and direct the best assessment possible. Fitfi value figure January 2031. In January 2031, the expense of step not entirely settled to be at around a base in every way that really matters worth of 534 in an unpretentious way. The step application esteem commonly worth can sort of show up at a constraint of 607 with the ordinary trading pretty worth of 591. In a genuinely significant way. Step application Fitfi value expectation February 2031. Concerning February 2031 step application cost is figured to explicitly show up at a most decreased possible level of 580, which really is genuinely critical. The Fitfi cost could show up at a most exceptionally outrageous possible level of 637. With the regular gauge cost of 608. Step application value expectation walk 2031, the expense of step application sort of is expected to in a real sense reach at the scarcely the least really worth of 604 in 2031. In an unobtrusive manner, the Fitfi cost could show up at a generally fundamentally outrageous truly worth of 661, with the ordinary trading cost of 633. All through 2031, step application Fitfi value figure April 2031. For April, the expense of step application in a real sense is expected to show up at a normal month-to-month farthest reaches of 645, while the coin will trade between a restriction of 687 and at sort of the least 617. Which fundamentally is genuinely huge. Step application value expectation May 2031, the expense of step application explicitly is expected to reach at the extremely and